All right, everyone. Yesterday, as promised, Donald Trump did go on Joe Rogan's Spotify podcast. It was 3 hours long, so I didn't get to the entire thing, but there were a few highlights that were quite funny. A lot of it was about like sports, UFC, and stuff like that. That's something that both of them sort of have in common as interests. That has nothing to do with politics. It was a more relaxed interview than typically we've seen lately. Donald Trump is a lightning rod for people wanting to come aboard so that they can basically just hammer him over and over. And that's basically their goal. It's not really a good faith interview when you think about it if the entire time all you're doing is badgering the person. Kamala Harris, meanwhile, the tendency is that she doesn't need to be badgered because she won't answer the questions anyway. On the off occasion that somebody tries to follow up with her, she just starts cackling anyway. With Trump and Rogan, it was generally fairly calm, but there were a few takeaways. For instance, the bit about windmills, offshore wind, and whales, actually. And fundamentally, they're correct, which is that offshore wind has been correlated to potentially scrambling the navigational systems of whales. But Trump came out and said he wanted to be a whale psychiatrist. That was funny. There were a few zips in there that were amusing, and that's what we need from Donald Trump now. I think he's really fallen into the pace of the last couple weeks of the campaign, in that he's looking at the polls. And he's saying, okay, I'm ahead in all the swing states. I'm ahead in national polling, arguably at this point, and I'm on the rise. My opponent is outspending me 3-1, but really not making inroads and is hemorrhaging independent voters. I think at this point, he's not taking it quite as seriously. He's having more fun because he doesn't feel that there's any existential threat from Kamala Harris towards his campaign, and he realizes that he's got the high ground in a fairly big way. So he can go on Rogan and stuff like that. And I loved how the liberal side of the legacy media was complaining. Donald Trump is skipping rallies to go and talk with the worst person in the world. And, hyperbolic shit like that. You knew that it was coming. It didn't require a prediction to suspect that that would be how they would react. Oh my God. Donald Trump refuses to come on our glorious CNN, our Clinton News Network. But he's talking to this evil podcaster who's a Nazi. And stupid things like that. I still know Joe Rogan best from Fear Factor back in the day. Once they eliminated the gross out stunt, it was never the same and fell flat after I think 1 or 2 seasons. There was a reason for that. People enjoyed watching people vomit after eating fermented squid guts and things like that, and then 1,000-year eggs and shit like that. We're going to have you stuff this live tarantula up your ass and then snort this habanero powder. And whoever can go the longest without keeling up in a fetal position is the winner of this round, and stuff like that. That was great back in the day. Joe Rogan is a good interviewer, though. You'll notice his style is different from what you see from an Anderson Cooper, a Joy Reid, somebody like that. That's more combative, and it's much more partisan. Whereas Rogan tends not to berate his guests, no matter where they are on the political spectrum. He'll push back against them like he did against Trump. Drill for answers, that wasn't entirely clear, what's your biggest regret and stuff like that. He's a competent interviewer. It's funny, he's a very, very multi-dimensional personality. You've got the UFC, you've got the Fear Factor sort of thing, you've got his fucking podcast. He's pretty talented, actually. I like Joe Rogan. And I thought that this was a good interview. I like how some people in the liberal legacy media are like, well, it was too softball-y, it was a love fest. Well, yeah, considering the fact that every other interview he's attended, including on Fox to some degree, he's completely combated against, and he's debating the moderator on a regular basis. It's nice to be able to see him in a more calm demeanor and just sort of answer the questions and be more off the cuff. Like, he's not going to bring up whale psychiatry in the context of an MSNBC interview, I wouldn't think. And so it was more of a natural flowing conversation. Of course, they're aware of each other. They've hung out before, so there's a little bit of camaraderie there as well. Overall, it talked about some of the similar issues that you've got really in the campaign in general, like immigration, for example. We know where Trump stands on that. It's good to, flesh it out during the interview, but it's nothing particularly new. Or on crime, with the Kamala Harris administration completely ignoring the issue. Oh, Venezuelan street gangs are taking over entire city blocks. Well, it's only a few city blocks. Oh, it's only a few cities. Oh, it's only a state that they took over. That's basically the kick the can down the road mentality of Harris and Biden. Whereas Trump's like, no, I want to stop this from happening. We're going to deport some illegals, we're going to build the wall, and things will generally be better. Not perfect, but they will generally be better. On tax reform, he once again sort of floated the idea of abolishing the income tax. I support this. I think we should move towards a small flat tax plus tariff model. If states want to use sales tax, that's fine. States, by the way, are the ones that do property taxes. Not all of them do. Showing that a state can exist without a property tax, by the way. I think that those should be abolished up to some arbitrary amount for a person's first home, for example. If you want to increase the property tax for people to have 3 or 4 houses, that's perfectly fine. It's called homesteading. It's sort of the American dream. So overall, I'd give it high marks. It was a good interview. No huge fireworks or anything like that, but there were those moments where Trump says something or Rogan says something that's particularly funny. And that again was something that people are probably watching the interview for. It's like, well, you've got this one dude is stoned, and this other dude has a penchant for saying zany stuff on a fairly regular basis despite being a teetotaler. Can you imagine if you did get Trump loaded, how fucking whacked out he would be? There's a reason that he doesn't smoke the reefer. And so naturally people were tuning in for that. I like also the quote from the legacy media saying, well, Rogan's audience is almost entirely young men, so it doesn't really matter. All right, very well. Yeah, I'm sure that there are no undecided voters that ever tuned into a Rogan podcast. That's like saying that me, as an independent voter, I would never watch a quip by Joy Reid. I may deeply disagree with what she says, but as part of my high-info voting mentality, I sort of want to know what people are saying, what ideas are being bandied around, etc., etc. Trump is, by the way, fairly similar. He doesn't lock himself into an echo chamber. Unlike Kamala Harris, he has repeatedly gone out into adversarial territory to conduct interviews, sparred with many, many journalists, CNN, MSNBC, etc., CBS News. Kamala's done this exactly once. By the way, there was a matchup over the last couple of months during the campaign, and it's insofar as Kamala's been the candidate, not nominated, but selected by the DNC, basically, and showing the number of rallies and interviews and other appearances and so forth. And despite the fact that Kamala is repeatedly and constantly rambling about Donald Trump being exhausted, he actually almost 2-to-1s her on some of those metrics. He is the workhorse, she is the show pony. I noticed that she decided not to go on Rogan. Well, supposedly that's exactly the demographic that you want to change the mind of. Young males, because Kamala has a problem with young male voters. Why not take the opportunity? Oh, I think I know why. Give Kamala Harris 3 hours to speak unscripted. What do you think will happen in the course of that time slot? She's going to make mistakes. And it's not going to be, the occasional fumble like Trump occasionally has. It's going to be more like she starts cackling because Joe Rogan brings up Yemeni famine children, or she just goes crazy. She walks off the goddamn interview because she got a question she couldn't answer and Joe Rogan decided to press her. She would rather go and talk to Al Sharpton or Joy Reid or somebody like that. That's about all. Peace out.